Hello, BookTube, and welcome to another fiction review. I like to visit my local library on Tuesdays because on Tuesdays it opens from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's the only evening opening, and that's fantastic. If I happen to be working from home, I finish at 5:30, and I literally have a minute's walk at a comfortable pace to get there. And then I can browse for an hour, and it's quieter than Saturday morning, which is the only other time I can go. Now, throughout most of this last year, every time I visited, I would see this one book. It's a big hardback book, vibrant pink cover, and the title was in white and gold lettering, and the title was a name. And so I would pull this book out and I'd look at the cover illustration, which would show a woman's head in profile with 3 gold hoops in one ear, and the hair had long braided strands that were swept up and they were all coiled up into, I was going to say a bun, but a bun is small. It's more like what you would get from my hair, okay? This was really abundant hair, what you could call a crowning glory. And yet this woman had no face. No face, and yet clearly a lot of presence. So, if the cover artist felt that what they were doing was trying to plant a question in my mind, a question that just kept asking itself every time I visited the library, until finally I just had to know, who is this woman? Well, then their instincts were right on target. Today, we are reviewing Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams, published in 2019 by Trapeze, which is an imprint of the Orion Publishing Group. And you can see that cover right there. That's what I kept seeing. I also was fascinated by how the title letters wove themselves into the hair like it was some kind of decoration. I don't know, that was also very drawing. So let's pitch this novel. There's a dedication in the front of the book which reads, "To all Queenies out there, you are enough. Trust me." This is a novel where the story arc is a very different shape. Think of the typical situation, right? Typical situation, protagonist is led to or compelled to meet a challenge, to risk more, to fight, to seek, to explore, and the stakes, they gradually rise, don't they? Because one challenge leads to another, and then maybe there's a setback which requires greater effort from the protagonist to reach their aim, and all these challenges, they build and build and build, and then they peak, don't they? There's an event of peak impact where the protagonist overcomes the final obstacle, and then all the story questions are answered, or the villain's defeated, or the end of the world is averted, or Elizabeth Bennet marries Mr. Darcy, whatever. With Queenie, you meet a main character who is in free fall. It's way more difficult to believe that you're in the company of a hero, but that's only because you're missing an important part of their story, and as it happens, so are they. Let's talk book details. My library has had a hardback copy of Queenie on the shelves, which I first noticed after I signed out and read Keisha the Sket by Jade L.B. In that book, in Keisha, Candice Carty-Williams had an essay in the back where she talked about how she was influenced by Jade L.B.'s writing when she was creating Queenie. So from that time on, right, and we're talking last June, okay, from that time on, I spotted Queenie on the shelves, and every time I left the library without having that hot pink book in my book bag, I was wondering, what am I missing? What am I missing? The hardback edition of this book is 387 pages long with 30 chapters, so that works out to about 13 pages per chapter. But they're not those dense, tiny font pages. The font size is generous, and a fair number of the conversations in the book are happening via chat messaging applications or email, so those take a lot more page space to cover. Now, the paperback version is selling on Amazon right now for £6.99, and the Kindle version for £5.99. And I also see a lot of signed first edition hardbacks online, if that's your kind of thing. So let's talk about the author. Candice Carty-Williams was born in 1989, and she's lived in several parts of South London. There's a story that she has told the Guardian newspaper and the Southbank Centre about a particular move to Lewisham, which moved Candice away from her grandmother and put her in a home with her mother's brand new partner, and shortly after that, a brand new baby sister. And you can imagine any kid would act up in those circumstances. And yeah, it happened. So the school she was attending, they sent her home for a week. And it was during that suspension that her stepfather made her spend every day at the local library. And it was during that week that she discovered how fantastic books are, as we all know, for escaping from the unhappy things that are going on around you. And her favorite authors at the time were Sue Townsend, Louise Renison, and especially Mallory Blackman. Carty-Williams studied communications and media studies at the University of Sussex, but as she explained in another interview, and I'm quoting her now, "Growing up, I never felt I could write. Writing wasn't something I thought I could do." At the same time, she was frustrated by the lack of characters in the books she was reading with whom she could identify. And so after university, she applied for various internships and she finally landed a marketing role at HarperCollins. She was promoted shortly after that, and then in 2016, she moved to Vintage as a senior marketing executive, and that's when she started writing Queenie. This debut novel was shortlisted for the Costa Book Award in 2019, and it won the British Book Award in 2020, and it sold over 500,000 copies. Carty-Williams' second novel, People Person, came out in 2022, and there's going to be a television dramatization of Queenie, which will appear in the UK on Channel 4 this July. Now, you're going to find in my description box both a link to the show trailer and to those Guardian and Southbank Centre articles that I mentioned. Let's talk about the setting. Queenie lives in London, but if you review the text, you're only going to find the occasional place name, and that's because location is an unstable concept in this novel. The story begins with Queenie moving home, and then shortly after she moves again, then again. She's always renting space, and she's also recalling previous house moves and the difficulties associated with them. Brixton is maybe one location that gets mentioned a little more than others, and for that reason I've chosen Brixton locations for my backdrops here. But it's more a place that Queenie remembers from her childhood, and the Brixton of her childhood is not syncing with the changed Brixton of the present, to a point where Queenie starts to question the authenticity of her own memories. I'm reading this from page 19 of the hardback edition. "I went to Brixton for some Jamaican bun on the way home, hoping I could kickstart my appetite with my favorite comfort food. I climbed the steps out of the underground and stood, catching my breath once I got to the top. The smell of incense from the street sellers made me sneeze as I turned into the market. I hopped over a suspicious puddle and carried on, weaving through what always felt like thousands of people. I made it into Brixton Village and followed a route to the Caribbean bakery that was etched in my memories of Saturday shopping trips with my grandmother. I turned a corner and went to walk straight into the bakery, but was instead faced with a trendy burger bar full of young couples. The men were all wearing colourful, oversized shirts, and their female companions were all wearing colourful, overpriced coats. I frowned and retraced my steps, turning various corners in my search and convincing myself that I dreamt the bakery's existence before going back to the burger shop. In this novel, I would say it's the intimate interior spaces which matter more than exterior ones. The meaningful things happen in office elevators, in cubicles, in bathrooms, medical consultation rooms, kitchen tables, sofas in lounges, and bathtubs. In the same way that Queenie on the inside is more important than what Queenie may appear to be to those who observe her and they react to what they see without knowing her. So you can see from that extract that I read that it's Queenie's first-person voice telling her own story. And we also get access to her work emails and the chat messages on her mobile phone from a group of friends that she calls her corgis, after the late Queen's favorite pets. And just like pets, those friends are both helpful and unhelpful. They clam around whenever Queenie calls for them, which is often, but they don't understand what's really going on inside her, and they have their own distractions to deal with. That said, they do try to warn her often, and those warnings are good, but she doesn't always take them seriously. We also get access to Queenie's dating app. Now, I've never used one of these, but if the disturbing approaches that Queenie receives from interested males are typical, then wow, showing this serves as a unique way of highlighting the risk of pinning all your emotional well-being, all your hopes for your emotional well-being on the success of an intimate relationship with one person. Does this novel fit a genre label? Queenie has been called the Black Bridget Jones. It is not, okay? Yes, it is about a young single woman, and yes, the book's got a great sense of humor. But Bridget's happy ending, just remember, it was being loved by Mr. Right. It's basically playing the Jane Austen card. Queenie's happy ending is getting professional help so that she can grow her own love for herself, and also so that she recognizes the network of support that she has and learns to give greater value to that network as a whole instead of to any one relationship that's part of it. And that, I think, is a really robust redemption story. It's one that you could literally take away like a guidebook and copy it. So what, if anything, stands out as an aspect of this novel? Well, I think it is that narrative voice and the structure of the narrative, which isolates the reader with Queenie at a bad time that just gets worse. And so it's very, very easy, as you are watching her go from one irrational decision to another, for you to put on your judge's wig and start going, tutting and shaking your head. After all, that's what Queenie's friends are doing, and her boss, and her auntie, and her grandmother. They're all judging her without understanding what led her to this point, what's making her act the way she does. And Queenie herself doesn't understand. So what you're going to do through this book is you're going to travel with her on a journey of gradual self-understanding, where she will become kinder to herself, and you will learn another one of those embarrassing lessons about not jumping to conclusions, except that in this case, no real person will have been harmed by your judginess. Let's talk about the problematic content in the book. The sexual encounters described in Queenie are frequent, they're graphic, and some are abusive, and the abuse sometimes is racially motivated. There are also recounted memories of casual racism, also memories of domestic physical and emotional abuse, which I admit I had to read over more quickly because the dialogue and the threat to the child was very real, very tough reading for me, but it did not involve long portions of the text. If we're going to talk about the context of that problematic content, I want to stress what Candice Carty-Williams herself, unfortunately, has had to stress, that Queenie is not, repeat, not an autobiographical work. Like Jade L.B., the novel is not the author's story, but it contains truths that they have known or heard about, and by putting these in a novel, they bring those truths out of the shadows, out from behind the password-protected walls of social media and dating apps and text messages and locked doors. Queenie, to me, it's a novel that carries on that Dickensian, Gaskellian, Henry Mayhew-esque tradition of social realism. It's fostering better understanding, and it's revealing the hypocrisy behind the veneers of respectability. Okay, any suggestions for related or follow-up reading? Well, there is an annual Black British Book Festival. The 2023 one was hosted at the Southbank Centre in London. Now, try as I might, I was not able to find the dates or locations for the 2024 one. So please, if anyone is out there and they know they can guide us to a URL, please feel free to put in a comment so that we can all have a look at that. And that's another review done. Yeah. What's coming up next? I am 40 pages away from the 2/3 mark in Virginia Rounding's biography of Catherine the Great. So you will get vlog part 2 at the weekend. Of the 7 Moons of Mali Almeida, which I'm reading as fiction, I have 6 moons left to read about, right? So quite a bit. I need to get my skates on, as they say in the UK, and finish that book. I hope your reading plans are staying on track. I'll see you again soon, everyone. Take care.